Thanks for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have with me Bob Bobel from Cayosoft. So, Bob, if you could give a little background on yourself and the company.
Yeah, I'm Bob. I'm the CEO of Cayosoft. I'm an old dude. I've been doing Microsoft technology and management around that for longer than I care to admit. This current iteration, my current career as CEO of this company, was to actually found the company with my business partner. Very, very smart, much smarter than me, an individual much smarter than I am, and re-envision how we do Microsoft management, change auditing, and recovery. So if you're an organization that has a heavy investment in Microsoft, they have such a broad user base that having some tools like ours is really a must-have nowadays. So that's what we do.
Okay. Well, first of all, I will say it's a quality of a good leader to work with people who are smarter than them. I think bad leaders get that wrong. Bad leaders feel like they need to control everything and they need to be the smartest person in the room. It's like, no, that's not how you build something. The way you build something is you hire people smarter than you. You work with people smarter than you.
You could also look at it a slightly different way, which is everybody's smarter than that guy who's running the company, so he can't help but hire smarter people. No, I think you have to find smart people, but you also have to find people that I think have some practical or common sense. I don't think it can just be sort of smart for smart's sake. I have a couple friends that are just genius level, and sometimes they have the funniest stories about not being able to find their car in the parking lot. And then I also think, there's something to be said for experience as well. I think, actually doing a task 3 or 4 times, the 5th or 6th time, you get a lot better at it. And since this is probably the 4th or 5th time, our team has gone through this process and looked at the space we're in, I think our products are better for it.
Okay. Well, so going back to the other part of what you said in introducing the company,
Mm-hmm.
You are focused primarily on Microsoft Active Directory, Entra, whatever Microsoft environments,
Right?
Which that alone I think is it really is sort of illustrative of just how large Microsoft's ecosystem is, how their global footprint as a company, that you can have companies who that basically are just I just work with Microsoft stuff. Like
there is a scale required to have an ecosystem. IBM had that. I worked in college. I worked for a company that did data mining out of AS400 mid-ranges, right? And the fact that guy could survive, and he was a regional guy. He wasn't, it wasn't like he was a national or global selling organization. He had 5 or 6 customers in mid-Ohio. But the costs and the problem set that come along with those large enterprise software companies allow that, and I think it makes them better actually, because they're torn in a lot of directions. They have small businesses with 10 employees. Do they need an automated onboarding user provisioning system from an HR tool? No, they're going to hire one person a year. You can sit down and key that in, no problem. You're not going to probably make mistakes doing one a year.
Right.
You go to the opposite end and you have a company with 300,000 or 400,000 people, may not even all be employees, might be vendors. We deal with some state and federal agencies where they're actually citizens that are in their environment as well, mostly around vendors and contractors. But we do have one that everybody who files taxes in that municipality has an Active Directory ID assigned to them. Strange. But at those scales, and because of the different business models, I think it helps Microsoft because they have such penetration in this space that was generated, in the client server world. That's 2000 or late 90s, early 2000s, up through today, and now with moving to cloud, they now have 2 of those environments. And we do see more people trying to do the things that Microsoft does. Google is around now, but I remember back in the day when Microsoft started the Office suite, there was WordPerfect and there was Lotus Notes or Lotus 123, right? And those were the big competitors. Now it's Google and Amazon that are, well, with Amazon, it's more like co-opetition, I think, in some cases. But it's a different set of competitors that we see now. But the core problems are always the same. You have a human being that gets hired into an organization. You need to make sure that that person is who they say they are, and in order to give them access to your sensitive digital assets, give them a laptop, make them sign in. And it's even gotten more difficult over the past 20 or so years that we've been doing the Microsoft directory stuff. In that now we have two, right? We have the on-premise legacy client server world, still deeply embedded in the minds and architectures of organizations. And now we have Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, and that has a whole new set of I think challenges that it comes with. More centralized, obviously, because it's cloud-based, can be more flexible. We have a lot of customers that cannot have cloud-based computing in their environment. So how do those guys get served? So I think Microsoft on the Active Directory side is a little bit of a victim of their own success. That thing is so popular that, I think when I was an early product manager for a company, Microsoft was saying somewhere 92, 95% of businesses globally ran Active Directory. Right. Whether it was running it legally with a license or not is a different story. And you look at that scale, and then if you go out and just do some math and say, how many businesses are out there, how many employees there, it's a staggering amount of people. It's a staggering amount of licenses that they had. And you see some popular application like Microsoft Exchange, which used to be on premise, which now is 90% in the cloud. Yeah. And you realize that was probably 10 or 15 or 20% of the Active Directory market. That starts to give you some scale. Everybody uses Exchange at work. Well, that's a small portion of the number of people that are logging into Microsoft. And of course, that massive standardization on Microsoft that occurred is carrying forward. So, we still see Office is the most popular online, productivity tool set. There are others out there. But I think it's, Microsoft's inheriting a lot of that. I think that space is theirs to lose as well. I think they're doing a pretty darn good job on authentication and security in that space. Where we help there is, there's a lot that I think IT teams feel like they lose control because it's now somebody else's servers and somebody else's environment. You don't have the same level of access that you had prior. We bring a lot of that back. I think there's also that problem going between the two, right? If you have both environments, now I have two things to worry about. That means two different security environments and configurations. And in the past, vendors really thought, well, if I sell a tool today, my reps know a particular, set of buyers. If I have another tool that appeals to those buyers, I'll just give them that other tool. That sales rep puts it in their sales bag, and they walk in and they sell another tool. It's easier, right, to sell to somebody you already have trust with. The first tool is probably pretty good. The second tool is probably pretty good. How about a third tool? Hey, when you get to 9, 10, 11 tools, it gets a little saturated. Some are better than others. Now all of a sudden you double the environments. Do you really want to do that again and have 18 tools, right? So we took a completely different approach when we did that to try and consolidate that down into what we built, what we would call a platform rather than individual applications that you buy. I think we're probably the only people in our space that are doing a platform too. So everything kind of goes in one bucket. If you look at cloud, it's a platform, right? It's the fabric of the cloud that you're using, right. and everything's, you go to Office and right there you see Copilot, which is a different app, or you see Planner, when it's all pretty much integrated. And that's kind of the approach we took when we started looking at this and designing it back in 2013 and 2014. And I think it's time for that kind of consolidation, and it fits with the cloud model, and our SaaS model is I think has a companion to it, which is an on-premise subscription model. So it's not service. You guys still do the installs, you still do the maintenance on your own servers, or you can use our SaaS service. So you get to pick and choose. And I think that helps scale too. little bit better than client server solutions did in the past. Microsoft, I don't know if you remember or if you ever even heard of this thing, but they had something called Small Business Server.
Hmm?
And it was Active Directory and it was Exchange and there was something else on there, I don't remember, but oh my gosh, if you were a 10 user dentist's office or an insurance agent, you tried to load that thing, it worked, but man, was it a mess. It was very difficult. Those same organizations use the cloud seamlessly and easily now. There's just no problem for them. They don't have to have that server. So there's definitely an issue there around scale that can be taken care of in both environments, I guess.
Yeah, dating myself to some extent, but yes, I mean I'm familiar with the small business server. I have a couple friends who like made entire consultancy businesses just around small business server. Like that's just what they did. There was so going back to how you could have a company who your sole purpose is basically providing an additional service for something in the Microsoft ecosystem, like that's all they did was consult companies on small business server. And I've got another friend who his entire business, he's self-employed, but his entire business is just developing SharePoint environments.
We see that all the time. Yeah, people are looking for the expertise. I'm in Atlanta currently. I got stuck overnight in Atlanta. I shouldn't say stuck. I enjoy Atlanta, but we did a customer council here. And one of the feedback points that we got was a lot of the folks that are our customers, they obviously have Active Directory and they're all, I think all of them were hybrid, meaning they were linking up and synchronizing to Azure as well. And most were Office 365 now. But they pointed out that they're having an increasing difficulty in finding people that are experts in the older technologies, the Active Directory, the Exchange server. So as Exchange server went to the cloud, they were happy because they didn't have to, maintain that expertise at the level they did prior. And I think you would see that natural transition from like a small business server to cloud. You don't have a server anymore. You have to worry about the storage space and whatever. You just have to worry about the bills, which are a little bit higher maybe than they were. But that expertise is aging out. And that's also a part of our concern. So we really tried to design our solutions to provide assistance or critical pieces. And we see this as a journey for people. We see it, they're all on premise today. They're using the client server. They went hybrid a couple years ago. 80% of businesses that are, more than maybe 100 people are hybrid now. And we see ours as the tool to help you make that journey. So we really try to make functional equivalency around sort of the delegation and protection we do on premise, and we offer that simultaneously for cloud, and we offer it in sort of this joint hybrid mode. And that's a different approach than we ever would have taken. And I have to really give credit to a lot of the companies that either I've worked for or have been involved with partnering with in some form. I've always kind of been interested in asking the owners, the guys that founded them, what was your biggest challenge, or how did you decide to do this, or what's the funniest thing that happened while you're, on the way to the play, or whatever. And I will tell you, everything that we do really has a lot of credit to be given to, the folks that started Veeam Software. That was Alita before that. It was their first company. Or, there was a company that I really enjoyed talking to the owner, PastLogix. That guy went on to run Oracle Identity for those guys. And there's just a number of those folks that had little bits of wisdom that we've combined now. I had hair when I started this. I no longer do. And I will say, I think the one thing, if I have to point back, is always be equitable with your customer. And they'll tell you what you need to do. That's the one thing that I think I learned out of all those guys is focus on being equitable with your customer. Give them what you're promising them. Make sure it works. It does what it says it does. Don't let the marketing hype obscure what you actually do. Don't say you're an AI company if you have no AI products. That's being false with your customers. Yeah, that was a dig at a competitor, by the way. They rebranded as an AI company. They have no AI tools at all. But I really believe that these ecosystems are so large that that expertise may be aging out now. We provide solutions that help you cope with that. In the past, it might have been people that were doing SharePoint that, they started getting, um, dragged into, hey, there's a different thing out there. We need to do migration now. So you can start to find those paths and the expertise you develop if you do it right. You can definitely build businesses around these large enterprise software companies.
Yeah.
It's sort of a natural, and they tend to leave little rungs on their ladder too for you to crawl up, right? They'll open their APIs, or they have a lot of programs internally to keep partners active and going. Some of it's a little self-serving, hey, come join the Microsoft market, right? I mean,
Well, it's funny because they're, like you talk about the aging out kind of thing. It's like there comes a point where that becomes exceptionally lucrative. Like right now, if you happen to be one of the 15 people on planet Earth who still is fluent in Fortran and COBOL,
yeah,
you can make a lot of money because there's still systems that are running on,
right.
So while everyone's over here we're doing Rust and we're doing cool things with new languages, it's like, okay, but the infrastructure running the world is still over here running on Fortran and COBOL.
Right. Yeah, I this is a long time ago, quite a while ago, probably 15 years ago. But I ran into somebody who, speaking of COBOL, he was an IT leader, and they had a COBOL application that they had spent 20 some years building, and they were looking to modernize it. And they realized it was going to take another 25 years to put it into a modern environment, right? Now that was 15 years ago. Now none of that stuff really exists because it's cloud. So maybe they have a better advantage now.
Now you just give it to Anthropic and let Claude refactor it.
Well, I would hope. Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, is giving AI the opportunity to try and rewrite something. But there's something interesting, I think, that we've already identified. We can ask as a company that's building software, right? And we have those 3 buckets I mentioned. I happen to know that there's 4 buckets that our type of company can make money in easily. So it's great if you're going to start a company to be in one of those. Migrations, the first, administrative tools around identity and governance, change auditing I mentioned, and then recovery of environments. Those are easy. Then there's some that are sort of secondary. I kind of think of SharePoint because it's a smaller market. I used to think of it as much smaller, but now because it's the infrastructure for the cloud, it's actually one of those maybe emerging buckets that has enough to really make a going concern. When we write something, let's say we have somebody that says, put a user into a group. Somebody has to write that piece of code, right? Okay. You can go out and do a plain old Google search and find 100 different people who have written that in the scripting language. You'll find a couple in Perl. You'll find a couple in, Visual Studio examples and whatever, right? Now, the interesting part is they probably all do it pretty simply. When we do it, we write it, we test it, and then we have all these customer environments we know that it has to work in. So then we apply some additional things, and it might work. And then we put it in our product, and then we get a complaint. Somebody with 100,000 employees, they have a 60,000 member group. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, the traditional way is to put the user in the group. Well, it might be easier to put the group in, go to the group and modify the group instead of the user, because the performance doesn't work. And so we might take 3 or 4 iterations to really get those things optimized. I don't know that if I have Claude or Anthropic or whoever build that, which one of those models I'm going to get. It might get me to 0 day faster, but 0 day is just the beginning of the process for us. We're kind of old Windows Server development guys, right? So,
right.
And we don't publish our code. So then you're getting the examples where the guy was in his basement, he needed something for his company, and it might be 500 people in his company, or it might be 10,000. I don't know. Chances that it's going to work right the first time are probably 10%, 20% for us. So it is what it is. I heard somebody talking about having, a screenplay written. I can't remember who it was. Probably Matt Damon or somebody. But they pointed out that you could have those AIs write a screenplay, but they're going to take examples out there that are sort of at the average. They're not going to be the Good Will Huntings or the, to have and have nots. They're going to be somewhere, that is a scraping of a lot of it.
I can vouch for that from a writing perspective. I mean, ChatGPT and Claude are both pretty good. I mean, you can get some decent content, but you're not going to get exceptional content. You're going to get, like you said, you're going to get the mean. You're going to get the mean. You're going to get the average of what's out there in the world.
Right.
So you're not going to set the bar because you're trying to use the bar to derive what you're doing.
Right. I think that'll get better over time. One example, for now it's the case.
Yeah. Well, I say one example. My wife and I were just talking about this yesterday. Is I find them hugely entertaining. But in the ongoing geopolitical situation we have, Iran has been cranking out these Lego video propaganda videos that are pretty damn good.
Yeah.
like the music they come up with is good. The lyrics are good. And yes, there are, we analyzed the one from yesterday or whatever, and it's like, it is AI slop. Like in the beginning, the Trump Lego is wearing a MAGA hat, and by the end it says Magra or Magsa. Like it starts messing it up. And it's like, you get what you get. But but the fact that they're, that they can crank out like a 1 or 2 minute mini Lego movie daily,
right?
And that it's relatively on topic and it's pretty good. Like, that's impressive.
Very impressive.
But I agree, you're not gonna write the next like Oscar-winning type movie out of that. I want to take a half a step back.
Yeah, sure.
Because I want to get into specifically. Yes, we know you're working, with Active Directory and with Entra, but let's get into more specifically what you're doing for those things. So, sure. What is the key problem in the market that you're solving? And bonus question, what differentiates you from your competition?
Right. Where do I start? We had the opportunity to build the first and what I would call the second generation of the tools in those three spaces I mentioned. Let me drill down on those spaces really quickly. When I say administration or management, what I'm talking about is the day-to-day user account management. And that translates into identity management, which is really two things. Controlling how people can verify their identity, that's authentication, authenticate they're who they say they are, and authorizing them to access resources or giving them access to resources that they need to do their job. So that's management to us. You can call it identity management, you can call it whatever you want. And it's not just one approach. There are lots of approaches. Some people will sit there at a command line and say new user or new dash user and then put all the parameters in. That's scripting, right? You can do that if you're wired that way.
Right.
You can go to a web interface. Usually Microsoft has one for Entra. They have a little console you install for on-premise stuff. And new user, there's a button there, and whatever. At scale, that might not work because of the volume. If you have seasonal business and you have 100,000 people worldwide, it's probably too much to hire 75 people to just do that all day long, 24/7. So then you start looking for workflow and connecting to HR systems. And so it's not just one thing in administration. And then there's the second piece, which is if you can automate it, do that. That's great. That's fantastic because it's cheaper in the long run. It's like putting a robot in a factory to build the parts, and instead of having 85 people, then hire really good people to maintain the robots, right? With administration, there's also another piece where it's just not worth putting the money and the energy into automating it. So you have to have some controls there. So maybe an example is I forgot my password and I need to reset that. And there's 2 or 3 other things that have to happen there. Maybe that only happens a couple times a year. So you don't want to put $1 million into that. So you have somebody on the service desk that, will answer the phone or, open a ticket, but you need control over that type of thing so that they can't abuse it. You're trusting them to a point, but you need to have a set of roles in place so they can only do the resets and not, go delete the CEO's account. And then you also want to have a set of rules to make sure, for example, the password's complex enough. Same thing happens with like just changing departments. Somebody gets a promotion. They go from engineering over to marketing. Well, I'm not sure that's a promotion. My marketing person wouldn't like me to say that, but maybe they're going from marketing to engineering. I don't know. You want to make sure that they're using the correct name for the department. You don't want them to abbreviate it or misspell it. There's another rule. It has to be one of these. So there's that piece.
Right.
Then there's understanding what the heck is going on and looking for things that indicate there could be an unwanted change in the environment. It could also be that you're under some kind of legal or regulatory requirement. SOX, HIPAA. There's lots of those things that fly around that are designed to keep organizations doing what they're doing and not run afoul of the law. And so change auditing is a very important piece, especially now that you have cloud where you're not in direct control of those servers out there. How many people nowadays know that a mailbox was moved by Microsoft from one server to another? Very few, unless you find a tool like ours. That may be important if your data cannot transit outside of the United States. And suddenly you realize, well, we didn't tell them. Now it's suddenly in Germany. Well, that's okay. The person works in Germany. Well, no, it isn't. We have a law or we're following some compliance regulation where it has to stay in the US. Swiss banks are great at that. They have to maintain their data within Switzerland if they're a Swiss-driven bank. And then you have the situation where, from a security and an IT perspective, the folks that are running your IT, you trust them. You put some guardrails around it, just like you do artificial intelligence. We call those guardrails, right? Make sure they're not doing stuff they shouldn't. And then you try to automate it as best you can to help them so that they make fewer mistakes or make no mistakes. But people are going to make mistakes. They're going to do something. They're going to accidentally remove, you have 5 people named Sam Smith. You get the wrong one, pull them out of a group. A day later, Sam's screaming, I can't access the financial reports that I got to talk to Wall Street about tomorrow. How do you know which Sam Smith it was? Well, you have change auditing that should tell you, but then you need to roll that back or recover that. So there's those unwanted changes. And that goes to extreme now with ransomware. Somebody compromises a user account. We saw that recently with a big software vendor. You compromise the user account, that lets them get to the workstation. They get to the workstation, they figure out a way to traverse laterally or horizontally into an administrative role in your environment. They change your security permissions. If you're not doing change auditing, you're not going to see that. Or if you're not looking at the audit data that you have, you're not going to see that. And they're very sophisticated. They may do it in ways that are very tough for you to see, or they may blind your events. They might, everybody uses event data. Well, we don't, but most people do that, and they might blind you there. So if you don't catch it, you have to be right every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They only have to get it right once. And if they get in once and they compromise your environment, they take out your on-premise Active Directory, you have to have some way to recover that at scale. And you have to do it as fast and efficient as possible. You can't have it, we'll bring back your first domain controller in half an hour, and then it's 2 weeks before all your users can log in. We see that with every other vendor.
I used to do that.
Did you really? Yeah.
Again, I'm dating myself. We're going back to early 2000s, but
sure.
like when I was a network admin, and running the whole network for a .com.
Right.
That's we were backing up. We had a really cool high tech robot that swapped out our tapes,
cool.
and we recorded everything back to tape. And something would go down, and it would take hours to get the primary domain controller back online. Fingers crossed that what you think you backed up is actually on the backup.
Right. Or go to the next tape and hope it was there, or the one before it. Yeah. It's tough to figure out where you needed to mount the tape or the file or whatever to get those. That is an architecture that we ran into. And everybody does it the same way. Now, the bigger vendors, they just do a server backup, which takes the ransomware, and anybody relying on that probably should have their head examined. We call those customers that are going to be Cayosoft customers at some point. Backup vendor customers who will eventually be Cayosoft customers. They just don't know it yet. Then there's the solution that we have that starts the same across 2 or 3 vendors in our space, which is we do just the components of Active Directory that are needed to restore Active Directory. We don't take the Windows operating system, the server operating system. So we leave all that malarkey behind. It's not really needed. And true story, and you mentioned what are our differences? This is one of our biggest differences. We do a backup. We call them clean backups. Pretty much everybody in our sort of narrow space of Microsoft tools does it that way. And we do the traditional restore. So if you have a domain controller out there and you need to restore it, and you have the hardware already stood up, we can take our backup and apply it to that machine. No problem. Everybody does that. We needed some way to demonstrate our software. And so we got that piece done, worked great. My partner called me at about 3 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, the demo is Tuesday, it's Saturday. You need to find 3 more servers because we want to show this entire environment being restored. I said, I'm on an island in Key West, Florida. I can't, there's nobody to buy machines. So, and there's no way I can get a rental car and drive to where I can buy a machine in time to get them, set them up and do the demo. So we started having a discussion around how could we solve the problem. We realized that with the cloud, with Amazon, with Microsoft Azure, we have a VM environment. Everything's programmatic there. So why not just programmatically, instead of making the customer build a server lab, either virtually or with hardware, why don't we just do it in the cloud? And then we'll do the backup and immediately restore it. Suddenly we realized if you then start those computers, you know that they worked. You've now done the quarterly testing that everybody panic mode does because they're not sure the backups are going to work, but now you know your backups worked. And Saturday morning, I had a cup of coffee and wrote out a patent. We got that issued. That whole process is we thought was worth protecting, and we do still. And we call that instant forest recovery. And the reason we call it instant forest recovery is because that environment can be recreated every night. You can have 10 of those. And so all your machines are taken off online, right? I mean, the ransomware hits, they're all locked up. You get the BitLocker warning. Well, I know that didn't happen yesterday or 2 days ago. So what do I do? Well, you pick that virtual lab. You change your network on-premise routing to point to that. You boot those machines. We already know they're good because we tested them already. And you're instantly back as soon as you get your router configuration changed. There's a couple other steps in there you might want to do. Might be good to do a little bit of investigation to figure out how they nailed you. If it's a permission issue, you can fix that. But we have all that stuff out there to make it as quick and fast as possible, because the worst thing you could do is have backups and try to do the recovery when you have the outage. A recovery during outage is no recovery because it takes long. There's so many variables out there. You don't know if it's going to work. If backups were good. Did Microsoft change the device driver or did the backups not function because we were out of disk space? You just don't know any of that. And so having a fault-tolerant environment out there is the best way. So starting there, that's a major differentiator. We're the only people that can do it. The other differentiators, like with the event data piece, we realized that in those same worst-case scenario attacks, so even if somebody just makes a mistake, they could go out and delete the event data, which would then be fed to Sentinel or to your SIEM tool, your Netrix tool, or your Quest Auditor, or whatever the heck you're using. We realized that's not a great way to audit because it can be tampered with, right? Or you might have server rollover where the servers generate so many events that they fall off the end, you don't get to collect them. So we completely changed that model in our change auditing, and it did 2 things. First of all, we do observational change. So we take a baseline, we know what your environment looks like, and then we look at your security policies. When they change, we record that. We look at your user accounts. When they change, we record that. And so we create a layer cake of change. So you see the entire change history. The best part is now that also lets us roll those back because we have all that data. You can't do that with events. So that's another major differentiator, and it's protected from attack. And then our administration is pretty traditional. I think the big difference in our administration is that it is built for cloud and hybrid. And we didn't just say, hey, let's go build a cloud management tool so we have something else to stick in our sales rep's bag, and they'll go sell it to these guys. We recognized very early on that cloud standalone and then trying to Frankenstein stuff that worked on premise was a bad approach. So we built our solution to do both environments, just Active Directory, hybrid in full hybrid mode, or just cloud. And we provide roles, business rules, and automation workflow. A lot of stuff that you'd find in any kind of identity administration and governance or identity management platform. But Microsoft's the identity platform. We recognize that's where the authentication authorization happens. We just give you a layer around it. Think of it as a firewall around that to protect it a lot better than you get trying to have native permissions.
Okay.
And also to help you automate it.
All right. Yeah, I mean, and I will say, going back to the beginning of this about like, building a company that deals, in the Microsoft ecosystem. And I previously worked at Alert Logic, and we did different things.
Yeah.
But one of our primary things, like we really were like a subset of AWS. Like what we were building was designed for AWS in a lot of cases, which is it's a good business. It's also sometimes a risky business because every year you show up at AWS and you wonder, is this the year that AWS just builds something that does what we do? But for the most part, it is a co-opetition. There is a collaboration there where it's like, I think the Microsofts and the AWSs, they understand 100%. Like, okay, well, we don't want to have to build these things. And so it's good for us to have these companies as partners that we can work with, and we can rely on them to kind of extend the ecosystem and do the things that we're not doing.
That is exactly it. That's exactly it. And you'll see the hippopotamus with the birds flying around him, picking the nets off them or whatever it is. That's the relationship. And I don't, I'm the bird in that case, and I'm not saying that's bad. It's great to be that bird because you get well fed, right?
Right. You don't even have to work for it. The hippo's right there.
So my parents, when I was in school, it was high school, I think, had a company, and they bought a PC, an IBM clone back then, and it came with a little package that said Windows 1.0. And I'll tell you, I never thought that would turn into a career. But having done this for so long, there is if you know what you're doing in enterprise, there is definitely a good career path for folks like me and for other folks that work for us. I was recently asked, how big is the Microsoft management tools section? So throw out SharePoint for a minute and just stick to the people that do the 4 core areas that we do. And I know of at least 4 companies that are 300 million or plus, all in this space. Most are sort of in that legacy generation technology mode, but some are cloud only mode. But in that case, you start to look at that and you're like, that's a lot. That's $1 billion industry of tools. And I will tell you, the one-to-one matchup isn't exact. So that company over there specializes in this particular area, and they do it very well for compliance and for, dentist's office or whatever. It gets to be very specialized. And that's stuff that Microsoft I don't think they could ever invest enough people or even AI to build those specific things. That's a 10, 15-year market. Technology is going to shift again. It'll have to be redone again, right? So, I think it's an interesting place to be in. And we're doing well, so I have some living proof.
So you are doing well, and I mean, I think that the patent is noteworthy. That most companies aren't operating on patented concepts, at least not something they patented.
Sure. Might be somebody else's, might be ours. You never know.
Right. I know you were also you're working with the IRS. There was a recent announcement about the Department of, I'm going to say Department of Defense. As someone who served in the Air Force and still understands how the Constitution works, I understand there's a separation of powers, and that the president can't actually just rename an agency.
Exactly.
So, but you have a relationship with the IRS. You have a relationship with the Department of Defense.
Yeah. And several others, by the way. But
okay, so. I mean, without just rehashing everything you just talked about, like, why are these government agencies, choosing to work with you?
That's a great question. And it has a lot to do with something I mentioned earlier, and that is, the original model, even at ILETA, or, this was the guys that started Veeam. They had a great model. They built one tool. It really took off. That was their cash cow. We call that the cash cow. They made a lot of money on that. Then they leveraged that with a second, a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. I think they had 8 or 9 when we were acquired finally. That model is tough to sustain when you see what you can do in the cloud. And that technology is not really keeping up, right? Those companies made their money. They now are thinking, okay, I don't have a lot of new sales on the Active Directory solo side. So my choice is to have my sales team just sell the cloud stuff. And remember, they're two separate products. So they didn't have a transition plan. And so what ends up happening is you get customers like the IRS. By the way, I knew those guys. We hadn't heard from them 17 years ago. I was in DC working with those guys to sell them the first time. Suddenly I'm like, hey guys, how are you? And they're like, Bob, how are you? And that obviously went a long way. Same with some of the others that we're working on right now. But those tools languished. Now they started out being built in country A. Now we're in B, C, and D. Those things happen. In most of those cases, it had to do with the company being sold. Venture capital came in. It's cheaper to build in India than it is in China, or vice versa. So let's move it. And so the business really impacted the way they treated customers. They became, or put themselves in a mode where they're not equitable with customers anymore. And I think that has a lot to do with why people are looking for solutions. But then they're also saying, hey, I've been waiting for a year for this fix. Sorry. Or why isn't this hybrid? We were in hybrid. One of our first customers where we had a competitive replacement, I knew the person. They called and said, hey, I think you built the tool we're using. I said, yeah, we did. New company, different code base, completely different approach now. And they said, we've used it for 15 years. It's been great, but we were in a pilot with Microsoft and going to 365. And we had to stop the pilot because we have 65 state agencies that all use this tool. And yesterday they could create a mailbox. And today with Office, they can't. And we don't have the people. We have 3 people in IT. We can't do that. So does your new tool do this? I said, yeah, it's exactly what we built it for. That was a very seminal moment for us when we validated everything we had been thinking about. And they were hybrid. They went hybrid, within 3 weeks, we had done a full replacement. And they were able to continue on and finish. They're now Office 365, and they still use on-premise Active Directory for authentication, but they use Office 365 for their productivity tools. It happens to be a state agency across the entire state. And then that was the first one. We've had dozens more after that. And again, it goes back to the technology was client server. They went immediate cloud, thinking throw another thing in the bag. They didn't think about it from a platform perspective. We had to, because we were so small. And I mentioned this, I think the last time we spoke, I started the company on my 401k. And please, if you ever meet my wife, don't tell her I had $1,200 in the 401k when I took my first paycheck at Cayosoft. Yeah, we burned through that in a couple of years pretty quickly. But that forced us to really look hard at how did we build our product. It also forced us to talk to customers more and more often because, hey, they're the ones paying the bills, right? This is what we did before. It was just there was no cloud before. We were doing identity management. Now we're doing hybrid. By the way, we did just file another patent recently on using that change audit data to train an artificial intelligence set of agents to be assistive in performing automated tasks around IT administration. So as those younger folks come in that haven't touched Active Directory, there'll be more assistance there for them to do those management tasks or those security tasks or what have you. Because we recognize that there's an opportunity to instill or teach what we know to those environments and then help the people that have never seen Active Directory in college, right? Their Office or Azure or Amazon. Now all of a sudden they walk into a manufacturing company's first job and what's this Active Directory thing? We think that'll help make that transition. And I think it'll help people have some more trust, I think, in AI. I tried to order a pizza the other day and it asked me, what sauce do I want? I've never once, ordering 2 large pepperoni pizzas, been asked, what sauce do I want? Crust, sure. I'm used to that. I could say thin or thick. Crust? Red one? The pizza sauce? Okay.
There are definitely some kinks to work out. Just using chat like voice response systems when when you're placing a phone call to customer service for any large company.
Yeah.
I understand the value, like why they would want to offload that to a chat bot, the initial stuff. Like I think you probably can, in an 80/20 rule kind of way, you probably can like address, hey, do you just need to know the directions? Do you just need the address? Do you just need your payment date? Like, like I can give you that information real easy.
Yeah.
What's both funny and frustrating now is, as companies embrace AI and they're trying to roll out things that are going beyond chatbot, and they're supposed to be more natural language understanding, but they're not really. And so like you'll have the system will say, well, go ahead and ask me your question. I can understand it. And then you ask the question, it's like, well, no, it actually doesn't understand anything. It still is only looking for like 5 keywords. And if you don't say one of those 5 keywords, it doesn't know what to do. And if you do say one of those 5 keywords, but in a sentence that is in a different context, it still says, oh, you're asking about claims. Let me get you over here. I'm like, no, I said the word claims, but I don't want you to send me to claims.
Your rep claims I did A, B, and C, but I didn't. Oh, you want claims. Okay.
Right. And so it's like, yeah, we have some work to do there in terms of like the AI really understanding the context of the conversation and not just keying in on specific words. But I know we're coming up with time, so I want to give you an opportunity here to kind of like give me your vision for like what's next, and what's next. I think it's a good tie-in with AI. AI non-human identities are non-human identities are actually the vast majority of the identities.
They are.
Whether it's devices or AI agents or whatever we're talking about. What's the horizon?
So we've added, in our change auditing tool, I go back to that because that's at the core of the platform. We did add tracking for non-human identity activities in the Microsoft stack, particularly around the Azure stack, since they don't really have that on premise yet, or may never. And that we announced at one of the security shows a month or so ago. The interesting part is when they came to me, I'm thinking non-human identities. I just saw something about UFOs and non-human identities. So we let you pick the icon, whether it's a little robot or an alien. That was my contribution. You can tell I don't contribute a whole lot anymore to the products. So that's big for us, is to try and decipher that. I think the other thing that we do already in our products is we provide controls to keep your administrators out of trouble, right? You trust them. They're human. They're going to make mistakes. I ordered a hamburger at Wendy's. I know I shouldn't put a pitch in for them. And there was a little bit of a mistake. Not in the order, took the order, but then it got in a loop. Do you want more? Do you want more? Do you want more? And 15 minutes later, the guy finally jumped in. We don't want to have me as the person ordering the burger know to say 5 correct keywords to stop the order and drive to the window. I think everybody can recognize that, right? That's what's happening. I'm being retrained for that, right? Because I'm trying to get through the day-to-day. I don't think that's appropriate for administration. We don't expect people to do that now. So there will be a lot more from us in particular around how that works. We're starting small. I think most companies are looking for their entry point. I think we can make our products easier to use today with the technology that's today. But we are looking and starting our design mode design cycles for how do we take that data that we have and how do we train agents and then obviously monitor their activity and control the agents with guardrails and permissions and the native things that we have access to, eliminate those. I think most people call it hallucination or a mistake. That's the last thing you want, right? So, and right now, I think there's a burden on people that introduce AI, not on them, because they're trying to replace having 3 shifts at the window, right? Or whatever they're trying to do. They're trying to reduce the cost of the human footprint in most of those cases and replace them with AI. I don't believe we're going to be successful in doing that particular thing in our space. I think it's going to be more, people are aging out, the old guys, the gray beards, the people without hair, or maybe a problem, but from age, those guys are retiring and they may not be replaced. So I think for us, we're looking at new methods of embedding that knowledge that we have into an AI model that doesn't make mistakes. It's checked by the human. It acts more like the robot in Star Trek or in Iron Man, right? Not the robot, the AI in Star Trek, or where it's interactive with the human, it becomes a tool for the human, not something that's just a cost reduction where I bear the brunt as the consumer or the customer. Again, that goes back to thinking about the customer first. We are all about customer experience and trying to really earn our reputation, because if you're good to your customer, you always treat them the right way, and the other folks don't, they're going to come to you for the next question, next problem. They're not going to go to the competitor. It's a little bit longer haul, I think, to do it that way. But once your reputation's damaged, it's done. It's hard to get that back. So we're trying not to make those mistakes. One last thing I'll mention, we are using AI in our business to automate business processes. And we are also in this fantastic situation because a lot of companies, and there were a couple just this last 2 weeks, that said, hey, we're going to reduce our staff by 30%. What they didn't say, it's because we're implementing AI agents to do some of that work. We're in a great situation. We're growing into AI rather than downsizing to it. So I think this is another one of those things where we were forced to innovate beyond what anybody had done before because of our size. Now we're in an enviable situation because we don't have to go fire everybody to implement AI in our company and in our products. We can grow into it. So I hate to invoke religion, but I feel blessed in the situation we're in. So, and I appreciate the time today, Tony.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a great conversation. Love chatting with you. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Until we meet again.
All right, take care.
Cheers.